Hello and welcome to this episode of the VCT Round-Up series. I think we're on episode 4 now. And today is going to be a bit of a different episode, as today we only have China to talk about, as the other three regions are currently on a break. And while there are games from both China and EMEA today, which could have made it into a bit of a longer video with 6 games, I felt like these 4 games, there's enough to talk about as to where they deserve their own video. And so then we're gonna do next VCT roundup will be lower round 3 and EMEA. But so today we have Billy versus FPX, Trace versus EDG, Nova versus DRG, and Shilai versus JDG. And holy shit, has China given us something here? Holy shit. Let's start with FPXvBLG. And I would say this game finally kind of confirms my doubts of this FPX roster. And after these 4 games, honestly, I have FPX barely even fighting for playoffs. I could see them going to like champs, but I'm not seeing them going to like any major events. Maybe they could fight up. I would say there's any team that's like on the verge of playoffs, I think could make another event. But I think that EDG and Trace are still, to me, considered the 2 locks at least for Bangkok right now. Obviously, things can happen, and we're gonna talk about the EDG game later. And let's just say there's definitely things that could happen with EDG. But yeah, BLG are looking a lot better than I thought. Like a lot better. I mean, FPX is still, I would say, slightly worse than I thought. But I mean, still, then, like, Yosemite has been a good pickup for this team. Like, the rest of the team is just not performing. Like, Life is just not performing. Ayang is not performing. Berlin is not performing. It's just Autumn and Yosemite. And sure, this BLG team is good, but I was not expecting them to be fighting here. And they win here in 2 maps where YC pops off once and Neff pops off with K9 and Russia being far behind. Not being far behind. And I mean, this game just in general, like, they were getting, like, dominated for large parts of this game. Like, 8-4. And sure, they managed to keep it close eventually. Or they started off with a pretty good defensive half here, actually. But, like, they just could not. They just got dominated when it came to attacking. Like, they could not attack to save their lives. And sure, BLG wasn't good on attack either. But, like, that should not happen. And then when it came to Lotus, I mean, 8-4 is fine, especially with the comp they're playing. It's not like it's super defender sided, but still, it's still like not that attacker sided. Sure, double duelist on Lotus is a bit questionable, but they have Astra Viper. Yeah, then their attack was just not good enough. Like what? What did that end up being? 5-5 on attack. And like you can't do that on your own map pick. And I mean, FPX, even against Titan Esports, like, they didn't look that good. Like, look at this game. Like, sure, they got a couple rounds here, but they're lucky to get a 6-6 half here. And then Titan Esports Club manages to win it in the end 13-11 because FPX just relies on. It feels like this FPX team just relies on momentum way too much. Like, even here, when they win on Fracture, like, sure, they have a pretty decent defensive half, but then on attack, I mean, it's an attacker side of the map, so fair enough. But yeah, their Fracture looked pretty good. And then Pearl, it was just momentum based, like 9-3 first half. Like, what a Tech couldn't really do much there. But it feels like this FPX team just relies way too much on momentum. Like, even if we look in this game, like, they had the momentum in the first half, but then when losing Pistol and then losing 3 rounds in a row, they're just lost here. Like, sure, they win 2 rounds, but then they're just back to it. And it's just like, and it's the same with second map here. Like, the second that BLG got this 8-4 half, they just could not get it back. Like, they relied way too much on momentum, I feel like, so far. And that's why, actually, if we look later, DRG are now above them. But yeah, Billy looks really good. Billy is my third best Chinese team now. And yeah, I think it's looking good. It's looking good for them. Moving on, we have the game between EDG and Trace, and holy fuck, did EDG look terrible. Like, Hey just did not die, though. But, like, EDG should not look this bad. Like, Kong could not get a kill. Chichu looked like Chichu, but, like, in Smoggy still did decently. But, like, nobody, Simon and Kong just couldn't do shit. Like, first map, look at this. Like, sure, they managed to keep it somewhat close when they were attacking on Lotus, but they still only got 4 rounds on attack on Lotus. And the 4 rounds they got were like in between rounds occasionally. And then, yeah, same here. I mean, Bind, attacker sided map, technically, although it hasn't really been that in China. They start off by getting the pistol and then the anti bonus. But then after that, they just literally cannot win a round. Like, they literally just cannot win whatsoever. Like, they don't win a round. It's ridiculous. Like, they just literally could not win a round for this entire game. And Trace just looked like the better team. Like, it wasn't really close. Like, Trace was just straight up the better team for the entire game. I don't know what the fuck happened to EDG here. Like, they looked decent in the Nova game. Like, I genuinely believe that. Like, they looked decent. Sure, Nova got to get a comeback here, a fake comeback, almost taking this map, but EDG managed to spring this game over. Eventually managed to get the rounds they needed. But like, EDG did not look good. Like, I genuinely think that she like could win this game. Like, that's how close I think this is. Like, sure, I still have EDG higher than Sheila, but still, EDG just did not look good against Trace. Moving on to Nova versus DRG, and this is where I feel like DRG are really showing how good they are. I mean, this Nova game, sure, Nova is not like the best team in the world, but I feel like they've kind of proven themselves. Like, they held up pretty well against EDG. They destroyed AG. And Wolves, I mean, they looked really good. I mean, sure, it's Guang and Swirl, or Guang, I don't know how you say that, and Swirl, that does most of the work. But, like, sure, they get one map here, Wolves, but, like, the other 2 maps, this one was close because Wolves have players who can shoot. And even then, it's like they didn't even shoot better. It's just kind of. They just kind of lost this game almost. They just almost managed to lose this somehow. I don't really know, but they should have won considering they had a 9-3 half on defense on Fracture. But when it came to Abyss, their Abyss was pretty horrendous, and then Split was just straight up demolition. Like 6-6 on attack is not at all bad considering they had double Sensi, and then they just could not. They just, yeah. Like, Nova looks really good when they look good, and sure, and they don't look terrible when they look bad. And I feel like you also saw that somewhat in this game, but DRG still dominated. Like 8-4 attack on Pearl, and then just closed the game out. And then they got a 7-5 defensive half from Bind, and then just kind of closed it out. And they genuinely look really good. Like, even against a team like Tyloo, like they were just closing out maps. Like, they're looking really consistent, DRG. Like, although, yes, I will agree that this DRG team is getting somewhat carried by Vukashu and Spirit Z1. And it's more of a 2-player game. I feel like, wasn't that kind of expected? That's kind of how this team is built anyways. And here, even look, they even had a bad game, Vukashu and Spirit Z1 against Trace. And sure, they lost quite poorly, therefore, but After that, I mean, Tyloo, I mean, it was just straight up beating here. And even then, like Vukashu is obviously the big name here, but like even then, like the rest of the roster has still looked pretty decent. Like Flexen has looked really good. Spirit C1 has obviously been a really good pickup for them. Like him on 5 Ace looked solid, but I feel like he's looked really good on this roster. And Flexen, he played for them last year, no? I'm pretty sure. Okay, he played for them later in stage 2. How did he look? I actually haven't checked this before. Flexen. Yeah, he looked decent last year. And I feel like that's been the case as well this year. I mean, Nova was pretty okay, especially in stage 2 last year. Oh no, he played for Billy. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's just joined this team. But yeah, he's pretty good. Like this team is just these two, like Spirit C1 and Flexen are looking like really solid pickups. And then Nick did not look like he is a bit inconsistent. Like I'm gonna say that much. Like if we look last year, I'm pretty sure he was inconsistent last year as well. Yeah, he wasn't that great, but he was like pretty inconsistent, I'd say. But overall, I still think that he looked good, and I think that's kind of been the case this year as well. He's been inconsistent, but pretty decent. And as far as Luke, I mean, he was also another player that played for them last year, and I would say once again, this is the thing with this team. They just had quite an inconsistent roster with Vukashu, and then this year they've just added more pieces that are actually pretty decent. So like while we look at this and we see that like Vukashu has obviously played well, like nobody can disagree with that. Like Vukashu has been great, obviously, but also he's not really been needed to carry this team as much as he did. Like he's not needed to do that much this year. They actually look pretty decent overall, and that's what I feel like. Why I feel like this DRG team is actually pretty decent so far. Like they've looked pretty good, and after that Nova win, that just solidified it for me. Like sure they lost 2-0 to Trace, but also EDG lost 2-0 to Trace. So Trace might just be looking like insane. Like it could just be that Trace is genuinely the best team in East China right now, and it's not really close. Because they beat DRG, which I say has potential to be a top 3 to top 4 team here. Like I think they're on the level of Chile, which I think is like the third or fourth best team. Like I feel like FPX, DRG, and Chile are the ones fighting for that third spot right now. And honestly, if EDG looks as bad as it did against Trace, I mean, they could arguably be fighting for even holding their second spot as well. But yeah, overall, I'd say that DRG has just looked solid so far. Yeah, they've just looked solid. And I think that's been really good for them. And moving on to the final game, and we have XLG versus JDG. JDG, which I ended up after this game pulling down this XLG a bit. I haven't really changed their rating a lot because I feel like they've just looked good in the games they've played. But I ended up just taking down their rating one step because of one simple reason, and that is that I just can't see them continuing like this. Like XLG are just like for me, XLG are genuinely just looking like they're just falling asleep for on map and then just taking over. Like it was the same, I guess. Like every single game they've played so far, almost like AG, same thing there. They fell asleep on map and then just won everything. And then even in a game like this BLG game, like sure they only won one map, but like every single map was close still. So I wouldn't really count this one as much. And same with this Wolves game. Like their first 2 games looked pretty okay, but even that Wolves game wasn't that great. But yeah, ever since then, it's just been they fall asleep on the first map, then gets back up and look like one of the best teams in the region. Like I just can't. Like they will not be able to lose a map like they do here. Like they won't be able, simply just won't be able to do this against the top teams. Like XLG, they're looking good, but like they're not gonna be able to get these 13-4, 13-6s against other teams. Like, I'm sorry. Sure, this is the other team's map pick. I mean, it might even be the same in the AG game. No, yeah, it was All Gamers map pick. But like, you need to be able to at least put up a fight on other teams' map picks against worse teams. Like, these teams are not supposed to win. Like, currently, what it's looking like for Sheila is that they just cannot win their non-map pick. Like, they have a couple maps they can play well on, but they just don't care, it feels like, about their own map pick, the other team's map pick. Like, Bind, Lotus looked fucking insane, and then Abyss just looks terrible. Against JGG, they had Pearl, which they didn't look good on, then Bind, Haven, they look great on. Like, you just can't look like that if you want to be a top team. And that's why I put them down one step, but I'm not like, I'm quite reserved on putting them down too much, just simply because of that reason, that it's like, I still think that they look good when they look good, you know? And it's quite often they look good. It's just that they are almost always losing a map because it feels like their map pool is kind of too small. But yeah, overall, some insane games, like absolutely fucking insane games. Been so fun so far. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This one actually got to be a little longer, just because I had a lot to talk about these games. Funnily enough, this one got longer, even though I spoke about less games, but it was just such insane games that happened, and I had a lot of thoughts on them. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great remainder of your day, and yeah, good luck for the teams in the rest of the games.